Hello, class. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about how arguments have been used to change the world. Now, when you think about arguments, I know a lot of you guys are probably thinking first of disagreements, you know, crash arguments that lead into physical, discourse and physical fights that eventually lead to someone being the physical winner, someone being the physical loser. But that's not really the type of arguments that we're talking about. Sure, yeah, historically, wars have been fought. People started out with some crass words or some different ideas being exchanged. They didn't like what the other side was saying, so they went to war. Then at the end of the war, there was a victor and there was a loser. And usually the victor wrote the story and controlled how things went on. But in reality, most major changes in the world have not been made by physical conquest. Most major changes in the world have been made by ideological stances and ideas and discourse being done. So, argument through words and through writing is the major way that things have been changed throughout the world, not necessarily physical altercations. So, when I talk about argument changing the world, I'm talking about the written word through argument, and I'm talking about the spoken word through argument, because this is really what has caused the biggest change in the world historically. They have that old saying, the pen is mightier than the sword. Where does that come from? Well, obviously, if you're sitting next to somebody and you're discoursing with them and you get into an argument and I pull out a pen and my opponent pulls out a sword, it's pretty obvious who's going to be the one who wins here. In a one-on-one altercation, the physical brute force of a sword is usually going to win out over a small pen. But when we're talking about changing people's mindset, when we're talking about changing the paradigm that people live in, when it comes to the point of changing people's ideological and philosophical stances, swords can change it in the short term. You can make someone believe something by brute force for a little while, but it's not really going to change their mind. It's not really going to change what's inside of them. But having a discourse or an argument through the spoken word or through the written word has historically been proven to change people's mindsets. People change religions because of it. People change laws because of it. People change their mindsets because of this. And it's the written word, not forced submission, that really causes the greatest change in the world. And this is why we say that the pen is mightier than the sword. Because the written word shared and exchanged across multitudes of people can cause massive change that creates a movement that cannot be stopped, oftentimes even at the force of physical altercation. If you take a look at the spread of Christianity throughout the world, some of that has been done, yes, unfortunately, by physical brute force. But the majority of that was done by people sitting down and talking with each other and reasoning with each other as to why they believe this way over another. And then, of course, you have the written word that went along with it, with letters from apostles and bishops being shared to argue and convince people that that way of thinking was what they believe was the correct way. Besides religion, let's take a look at some of the ideas that have changed the world. The arguments that brought about the signing of the Magna Carta, which took power away from the King of England and put it to the nobles and lords, and eventually filtered down to the common people. This all started with arguments, and this took away power from the king and spread it out a little bit further. The Magna Carta inspired the US Constitution. Let's go back, not after the Revolutionary War, before the Revolutionary War even took place, people like Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin. What can I think of people right now? Hamilton. These people wrote down arguments in favor of a new nation. And then after we won the Revolutionary War, more arguments were written in favor of a constitution. And actually there were like multiple different governmental ideas that they had, but they all wrote down these arguments. They gave impassioned speeches about it. And eventually our Constitution was formed here in the United States of America because of that. If we go back in history a little bit, an argument that changed the society of Rome. After Julius Caesar was stabbed to death, the senators that stabbed him were trying to convince the people that it was necessary, that they had saved the Republic because they stabbed and killed Caesar. But it was Mark Antony's speech and Mark Antony's argument that swayed the Roman people to believe that Brutus and the rest of the senators were not heroes, but they were in fact traitors to Rome, and that they had done a great disservice and a dishonorable thing. And this is what led Mark Antony and the other two of the Second Triumvirate to eventually root out those traitors, destroy them, and set up what we now know as the Roman Empire. Speeches and written work have changed minds all throughout the world. Think of the Gettysburg Address. Think of Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech. Okay, JFK's speech about wanting to go to the moon when most people thought that was an impossibility. Reagan's speech to the communists to take down the Berlin Wall, to end communism. This is a spark, this is an argument that led to the dissolution of the communist empires of the time. We can see all sorts of ideas being brought forth in today's society. We have arguments going back and forth all the time in politics. We have arguments going back and forth all of the time in many civil disputes. But it is argument that starts the spark. Whether or not you agree with some of these movements that have been taking place over the last decade does not matter. But we have to come to an agreement that the ideas being presented, the words and arguments being presented, have sparked people to get up, to move, to do something about it, to protest, to make changes in their life. So we see things like the Black Lives Movement. And we see how it became a huge, massive movement just because of the arguments and the words being spoken that caused people to say, hey, something's not right. I need to do something about this. There are multiple civil movements, multiple ideological movements that are happening all the time and all around us. Whether or not we agree with them is besides the point. But we all have to admit that the words put people in action. And when the people are put into action, that changes the world. I want you to do something for me. I want you to start taking a look at the world around you. And I want you to start taking a look at the arguments that you listen to, the reasoning that you are in line with and agreement, and the reasoning that you automatically go against and think to yourself, well, that's wrong. I'm not going to believe in that. And think to yourself, why? Why is it that I choose one argument over another in certain aspects of whatever it is that's going on in society? Obviously, there are sentiments of value, sentiments of reasoning, sentiments of logic, and of course, a big part of that is how the argument is presented by the author or the speaker of that argument. How can you affect the world, though? It's sad. It's sad that academics have a big part to play in argument. And over the last decade, actually over the last couple of decades, academics have not taken more of a stance on trying to change the world for the better. They get into a lot of arguments, they get into a lot of discussions, but most of that stays on college campuses. Most of that stays within their academic journals. Most of that stays within their sphere of influence, and they don't take it out to the rest of the world and really try and push these arguments, especially for those that are trying to argue for a better world. Why don't they do that? Maybe they think people won't listen. Maybe they think it's none of their business to go out there. But a lot of it, I believe, is because academics are comfortable. We're comfortable sitting in our own little sphere of influence, teaching our classes, writing to our academic journals, writing textbooks, giving information on our blogs online, and that's about it. But historically, academics have been the source of great change in the world. And most people don't even think about it that way. Do a little bit of research. Take a look at some of the names that have changed the world and have made great advancements in the world. Were they people that just, flied by the seat of their pants and decided to make change? Or were they people that were very academically inclined and put a lot of study and thought into what they were doing and what they were saying. An academic doesn't just have to be somebody that has a college degree. An academic is anybody that puts meaningful study and time into researching the topics and the arguments that they're giving. That's what makes a true academic. A degree helps, yeah, but that doesn't make someone a true academic. A true academic is someone that researches, that thinks about things, that comes up with critical assessments, and lets out their knowledge and their research with clear support, reasoning, and logic to propose new ideas and to support those new ideas through their arguments so that way people can better understand what it is that they're proposing. So, as we finish up this term, are you just going to be regurgitating other stuff that people have said? Or are you going to be a true academic? Are you going to try to develop arguments that can truly sway your reader? Develop arguments that can truly possibly change this world? And will you go a step further and maybe let the world read some of those arguments and see what they have to say about it? That can be a scary proposition for a lot of us. And I don't blame you if you don't want to do it. But if you feel that your arguments are valid and you feel that you even have a minuscule of a chance of changing the world, I encourage you to do so. Because the people that end up changing the world are not the ones that just sit by the sidelines. The people that end up changing the world are the ones that have the guts to take their arguments, to take their logic, to take their support, and put that in a position so that other people can see it. And whether or not those other people like to hear it, they at least hear it. And then we can reason together, we can talk together, we can start the discussion, we can start the debate. Because when ideas are put out there and we have that debate and that discourse, the world changes for the better. Whether it's a little bit at a time or a lot. But change is what we need. Change for the better. All right, guys. Hey, do a little bit of research. Find out for yourself all the wonderful ways the world has been changed by argument. For better or for worse. Take care.